Welcome to Casual Politics, Sir Alan Haselhurst. Thank you very much for accepting my request, and I'm very grateful to you. You need no introduction. You've been Member of Parliament since 1970, but you lost your seat in 74 and then you came back in 77. Right. And you also have been a Deputy Chairman and Speaker of the House. My first question is that when you first entered in Parliament in 1970, the Prime Minister at the time was Edward Heath. So how did you find him as a person, and do you believe any of those allegations made against him?
Well, I'd known him for quite a while before then, through university politics and through the Young Conservative movement, which I became involved in after I left university. And so I knew him intermittently throughout that time. And he was a man of contrasting mood, I think it has to be said. Sometimes when he was very outgoing, and other times when he was sort of more repressed in the sense of natural conversation and so on. But I had an admiration for him as a person, as a leader, and to me it was always very important that it was the right thing to consider this country joining the European Union, and that will go down perhaps as his most important achievement while in office. And no, I don't believe these allegations that have surfaced retrospectively. Well, there was always, anyone who is a bachelor for a long period of time and in public life will cause some people to say, oh, well. But I think it was Philip Ziegler in his rather good biography of Edward Heath who said his judgment was that he was sort of asexual and he was very much dedicated to the work, and all other things tended to get excluded.
John Campbell as well, his official biographer, he said in 1993 that he was asexual as well. So, and when you lost your seat in 1974, who did you blame that for your seat that you lost it? Was it the Prime Minister to blame?
Well, no, it was circumstances were to blame. I was, I think, one of the last to accept that it was right to hold that election in the circumstances which we did, and yes, to some extent, the Prime Minister must accept responsibility for that. But he was being egged on by the party. There's been no doubt about that. I mean, between the meeting of the party in December 1973 and when we returned after Christmas recess, I mean, the mood had changed completely, and there were people whose judgment I normally respected who had become gung-ho for an election, believing that this was the only way of resolving the situation. And I think that Ted really had to be, drawn to that point. At the time, I was Parliamentary Private Secretary to Robert Carr, who was the Home Secretary, and who again was a man who was sceptical about whether it was wise to hold an election in those circumstances, and on the issue of who governs. But he, in the end, sort of succumbed to it as well. And we all had to when the decision was taken. But I think it was a mistake to hold the election. And I was reinforced in that by someone in my constituency who said to me, Alan, what's going to change? And that was a penetrating question. What was going to change? So, yes, the government would have had perhaps increased authority if it had won the election. But actually it did allow it to become, the party became a sort of prisoner of circumstances, which it was a very unhappy sequence, as it were. So, yeah, he must take responsibility for it, but then we were all in it at the end, and so we can't do anything but blame ourselves.
You mentioned Robert Carr's name, Lord Carr, whom you worked with for actually from 1963 to 1974. So do you think all these people, they were one nation Tory that we don't have anymore in the Tory party?
Oh no, we still have one nation people in the Tory party. I certainly regard myself as a one nation person.
In the cabinet?
Yes, certainly. But any party at any time is going to have an array of people, and I think that what the Prime Minister himself is saying quite clearly is that he intends this to be a one-nation government. I think that is his brand of conservatism, if one nation can be tied down so specifically. But I think he is a man of liberal instincts, and I would certainly want to regard myself, even before David Cameron became a Member of Parliament, as someone who belonged to what I would call progressive conservatism.
Since you've been Member of Parliament, Britain had 7 Prime Ministers. Which one do you think that had the right vision to steer the boat to the right direction for the good of the people?
I think I've got to say Margaret Thatcher, although she wasn't
A very divisive figure.
Yes, but at times, sometimes, you have to make difficult decisions. And I can't say that all the decisions she was taking and the reaction they were getting from the public made me particularly happy. I mean, I don't think she was my greatest fan, and possibly thought that I wasn't hers. But I mean, I did have to accept certain things. I did, through conversations with people in industry, when her government embarked upon the privatisation programme, I became a convert to that when I saw the inefficiencies of some of the organisations that were in state hands and how they became leaner and meaner and more effective, if you like, afterwards. So I certainly was converted to that. I heard on behalf of my constituents some of the harsher steps that were being taken, particularly in the 1981 budget and so on. So, but looking back, I mean, one has to say that most of those things have not been repealed, even though we have had several years of Labour government. So it was a change that was harsh in implementation, but which has been something which the nation has benefited from. So I can't, with retrospect, deny her the role that she played in actually steering this country into a much stronger position than it had been, the sick man of Europe, for so long. Where I think later on, I mean, she suffered because I think any elected leader, political leader, has a sell-by date, because the more they are successful, there is a risk that they believe in their own judgment and listen less to their advisors and so on. And the calamity for Margaret was the poll tax, as it was dubbed, community charge. Again, she was decisive, and the party was dithering about what it should do about domestic rates. At every meeting I attended, if there were 8 or 10 people came in to see the then Secretary of State for Environment, there were 8 or 10 different opinions amongst colleagues as what to do. And in the end, Margaret lost patience with that, and so we're going to do this, and it was disastrous.
But why did you want to serve in a cabinet? Was it for the same reason as Sir Peter Tapson's?
What, that I didn't serve?
Yes.
I never served in government. I mean, PPS was as high as I went. Now, I think possibly, had there not been the election when it came, having become the PPS to a cabinet minister, if you like, I got half a foot on the ladder, and had that government survived its full term or been re-elected, then I might have had a chance of becoming a junior minister. But life had changed for me very considerably, because in the period when I was out of the House of Commons, well, first of all, there had been a change of leadership, and my own life had changed in that I'd got married, looking forward to having a family, and I was not, as it were, then sort of wanting to spend all my time here trying to catch the eye, be desperately ambitious and so on. I hope, more modest, as it were, than that, really. But was I disappointed I didn't get office? Yes, I suppose I was, but I just perhaps didn't fit with the leadership at that time, and time passed by. But my fortunes, changed in a quite dramatic way in 1997 when they asked me to be Deputy Speaker.
And as former Deputy Speaker of the House, what do you make of John Bercows' recent intervention to warn the Lords to not vote against government's bill on tax credits cut?
Well, our speaker is, I think now, the person who holds that job is unique. No other country is as puritanical as we are in saying that once you become speaker, that's it, chum. You sever all political links and you never mend them again. You go to that, if you don't die in office or retire, you go to the House of Lords and sit as a crossbencher, an independent, and so on. Now, I think that is very, very important to the way the business of this House is conducted, because it means that any individual member has got nothing to fear from the bias of the Speaker, or suspect the Speaker of bias. And so when you've got a sole member of a party here, or you've got the small minority parties, they are going to get a fair deal under our Speaker. Now, in some countries, even those closest in model to Westminster, you can be Speaker 1 minute, but you'll be installed by the majority, and if your party loses office, out you go, and nothing to stop you becoming the shadow economics minister or something of that kind. But in New Zealand, I was astonished to find that the deputy speaker could preside over the debate for 2 hours and then go down and speak in it, which just is unacceptable here. And so I think that the speaker's role is very important, and he is, from the time when William Lenthall in 1642 defied King Charles I, he is the protector of members' interests, and the Commons has won its independence through the years. It's acquired all the powers, so there are really no effective powers left in the House of Lords, and so our privileges must be defended by our Speaker.
And what do you make of the government's defeat in the Lords? Do you think that it was a blow to the government?
Oh yeah, absolutely, because there will be argument over this, there is a convention. We're very good at conventions in this country without necessarily solidifying them into laws. So it's an understanding, a convention, that the Lords should not have interfered with what was a financial measure. And this sophistry about, oh well, it wasn't in an actual bill.
But not on the secondary legislation.
Well, no, but that is arguable because it was essentially a financial matter. And so the Lords have, as it were, I think, singed themselves by doing that, and it's now probably going to lead to further action being taken to clip the wings of the Lords. So it gets us into a whole new argument we've did it for 104 years about what we want to do with the House of Lords, whether we're going to get to something radically different anytime soon. I begin to doubt, but I think there is no doubt about it that the elected House is being defied by the unelected House.
But the only reason that the peers, they rejected the secondary legislation in the Lords was that you didn't say in your manifesto that where those cuts were coming from.
Well,
why you didn't do it?
Well, we didn't. You don't necessarily specify down to too much.
UKIP did. It was a fully costed manifesto, but your party didn't do it.
Well, I didn't spend a great deal of time dissecting the UKIP manifesto to know whether or not I would agree with your judgment on that. But we said we would be continuing our reform of welfare, and that we would be seeking cuts of £12 billion. If that wasn't a clear enough signal, I'd be surprised. And I probably knocked on more doors in this election, in the run-up to it, than I'd ever done in any previous election. I think I walked 225 miles in the course of my campaign, and there was widespread popularity in my constituency for the government's programme of welfare reform. Now, okay, down to the last detail of what was going to happen, maybe there was no certainty. If you'd asked the first 100 people you met what exactly where will the axe fall and so on, not everyone might have been able to answer that question. But the shape of the package was such that there is still uncertainty because of the interaction of the introduction of the national living wage, the change of the doubling of free childcare, and the progressive movements to lift the tax burden, all those things, how they work out for individuals has actually yet to be tested. It's the fears that in some cases it was going to work out badly, which is a matter for concern. That an MP is the interface, if you like, between laws and regulations and the people. And the government can pull a big lever in support of a policy direction it wants to go, but the effect of it is not identical in every household in the country. And so I would certainly regard it as an MP's role to speak up for those who they think might be seriously adversely affected, and to see whether or not there can be ways of easing the pain, softening the impact, however you want to put it. Now, the Chancellor is pledged to do that, to rework his proposals to do it, but that we have to lessen the total cost of tax credits, which have now risen to £30 billion, and people have been drawn into welfare who would never have imagined themselves as being dependent on the state. And as Ken Clarke pointed out in what I thought was a good speech in the House, that it's allowed employers, as they've got used to the fact that tax credits have been burgeoning all the time, well, we don't have to put up the wages, and that is ridiculous.
Now, he should have been softer on those cards.
I'm sorry?
He should have been a bit softer.
Well, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but it is the actual extent. I mean, there is still a speculation as to, accusation and counter-accusation as to just exactly how harsh those might be in certain cases. But it is now the fear of that is causing the reaction in the House of Lords and concerns amongst colleagues. So now we are going to see what the move will be. But that there is a need to lessen the welfare bill is something for which there is general public support.
Well, Institute of Fiscal Studies said that, as you said, the introduction of a living wage, which is not even a living wage, and the increase in personal allowance tax will not be sufficient to compensate all those cuts, benefits which will be cut of the Chancellor's budget. And it also said that over 3 million people would be hit by those cuts. Do you believe any of this?
Not necessarily. No, I respect that organisation, but they're not always perfectly right. And in fact, I suspect that it is very difficult to know exactly what is going to happen in every single case. You can make estimates as to what you think will happen, but people are peculiar, and the circumstances are peculiar. You can't, as I said earlier, you pull a lever, and there are people who you think you're having a certain effect, which is uniform across a large number of people. It doesn't always work out like that. There are particular circumstances which make for hard cases, and you've got to deal with them, with those hard cases. But to believe that you can switch in policy in these terms without causing some difficulty, of course, is wrong. There will be some difficulties, and we have to see how we deal with those. But if you're going to achieve the cut that the Chancellor believes is necessary for in pursuit of the removal of the deficit, which is weighing us down, then if you don't take any action, then the situation, it'll be 40 billion before you know it, and that we can't afford.
So do you think that the Chancellor should make some tweaks to his budget?
Well, I think he said more or less that's what he's going to do, and we shall know when he makes his autumn statement in this coming month as to how he proposes to do it. I remember in a much lower scale that when Ken Clarke was Chancellor in the 1990s, and he proposed to put VAT at 15%, I think, of domestic fuel oil, he was defeated in the House of Commons on that, so he had to come back the next week and show how he was going to make up the money that he needed for his budget, which was basically to put it on fags, I think, and petrol or something of that kind at the time. To make it up, he had to make it up, the money, for his budget to work. And whilst I was fidgety and unhappy at times during those early budgets of Margaret Thatcher's government, I have to concede that looking back, although there was pain and difficulty in some cases, the economy has strengthened as a result of those decisions, even though you didn't always wake up in the morning feeling that was happening.
You mentioned Ken Clarke and his time as Chancellor, but before the 1992 election, in your manifesto, you said that you will not increase VAT. Does it mean that you put something in your manifesto and then after the election you do just something else, other than you mentioned?
Well,
what you mentioned in your manifesto?
I tend to regard manifestos as guides rather than prescriptions. But circumstances can change for any government. If you look at back over the record of our lifetimes, you will see that governments have said one thing or parties have said one thing and found the reality in government is rather different, or circumstances change. And when it comes to the economy, and everyone talks of we're now a global economy, and to the point that it's a truism, but things can happen which you aren't necessarily prepared for. The first oil shock of 1973 sent everything haywire. So no government could have, whatever it had promised in leading up to 1970, could have anticipated that suddenly the price of oil was going to be quadrupled. And there was a further oil shock later on. So things happen which are out with your control. And we are now quivering, are we not, or some people are quivering, because of the Chinese economy, the second biggest economy in the world, appears to be slowing, although its rate of growth is still remarkable. But the fact is that has an effect, has a ripple around the world. Uncertainty is caused by this and so on. If your currency value alters and so on, the expectations that you have for achieving trade balance and so on can be shot aside, so you have to take other action.
Before the election, David Cameron, he went on Question Time and he pledged that he will not cut the child tax benefits, and yet the government is going to do it. Did he lie to the British people?
No, I mean, he talked about child credits. We're still maintaining child credits for,
but we were limited
for
to
children. Yeah, that's right.
But he said that he will not cut.
He did not say that he wouldn't be it wouldn't be affected in some way in the way it's been done. But yes, we are still supporting 2 children through child credit, and that is a signal, if you like, that people have got to consider the cost of a third child, and so not necessarily expect the state to support that.
And today, David Cameron will make an intervention to say that a Britain without Europe will not be a land of milk and honey. Do you agree with him?
Do I agree with that? Yes, I do. Yeah, I think all this nonsense that's being spoken about, we shall be all right on our own. I mean, it's unproven. It may be what people feel like, but the truth of the matter is, how are we going to fare better in trade negotiations as a market of 50 million in dealing with the United States? So I'm in no sense anti-American, but the fact is that they are very ready commercially to screw you into the ground, and they nearly caused us to be totally bankrupt in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War. We had to go begging. So the fact of the matter is that when you're negotiating, when the United States market of 300 million is negotiating with the European Union, market of 500 million, the terms of that argument are going to be considerably different than if they pick off an economy of 60 million as against their own. So yes, we've got to be realistic about that. I don't believe we would be able to get a better deal on our own in trade negotiations. I think that is totally fanciful. But the other important thing is that the reason why we have had such a lion's share of outside investment in our country is because we are members of the European Union. People may like us, and in fact that is one of the reasons why they come, because you've got Britain has got a reputation for straight dealing, that is commercial integrity. Our laws are sound, and there is very little whiff of corruption in British society, and that gives confidence. And by the way, the English language as well. Many people like dealing with that. So, but they're not coming because they're just romantic about us. They're coming because we are the access point for the 500 million market. So we are exporting motor cars now. Like, we never believed we could become net export of motor cars, and we do now. The people who say, we should get out, we should be better on our own, because these dreadful French or the Germans or this, everyone's trying to twist us, make life difficult for us and so on. when you say, well, what about if we're then out of the common market? Wouldn't there be some risk to whether or not we should be able to have the same unhindered approach for our sales of motor cars into Europe? And well, why would they do that? Well, sorry, if you think they're being so horrid to us while we're in, what do you think they might do? Won't you see the Renaults of this world go dancing up to the French government and saying, look, what are we doing about all these cars coming in made in Britain? We should put up a tariff against them, and there'll be no law to stop them doing it. So it's not whether that would happen, it's what the investor would think might happen. Businesses are risk averse, and if they thought for 1 minute that Britain on its own and not in the European Union might find itself disadvantaged by that, then they say, well, they may say for Britain, France, Belgium, Holland, So that's the risk we run. So it is just fanciful to suppose that we could carry on as before. What I learned from my time in industry was that you need a size of market to enable you to sustain, a domestic market to sustain the huge burgeoning costs of research and development. We're rather good at inventing things. We got to our credit a very high percentage of the major inventions of the world. Where we have miserably failed is in always exploiting those to our own advantage. Now you've got to have a large domestic market. That is the key to it. So when people say, oh look, our sales to Europe have now dropped below 50%, we'd be better off dealing with the rest of the world. That is complete nonsense, because it is the base that we have in Europe which enables us to develop the products that the rest of the world might want to buy from us. I saw that myself when I was in the plastics industry, and when a traditional market like Australia was consuming enough polyethylene to justify building its own factory, it did. And has immediately put up a 200% tariff wall against any foreign, including British, polyethylene going into Australia. It was absolutely right for Australia to do. And that's what will happen around the world as the developing economies of South America and Africa begin to have the consumption levels. They will manufacture these things. And so you've got to be one step ahead. You have got to have the product which they're not going to be ready and able to make in the foreseeable future. And that's the way forward. And to believe we can do all that on our own is just romantic nonsense.
But if the UK decides to stay within the European Union, as you're implying that it should do, so how could we control our borders? Because it seems that we can't remain as member of the European Union and at the same time to control our borders.
Well, the argument is getting muddled over people coming into this country, and I think what the Prime Minister is going to point out is that
it is happening now.
If you have a loose organisation, a loose association like Norway has, you are still subject to free movement of labour. And it's not the free movement of labour from Europe that I think is most worrying for British people. It is the free movement of people coming in from other parts of the world that is the worry for them. And we've always been very generous so far as that is concerned, and we are a country through the centuries been made up of all forms of immigration, refugees, and so on. It's hard to say what it is that makes us who we are today. So I don't have any hang-ups about that. The fact of the matter is most of the people who come under the free movement of labour principle of the European Union have come to work. Now, yes, I think we might want to get some understanding from other countries in the European Union about whether the free movement of work should extend to the free movement for benefit purposes, and that you should have some rules controlling that. But the fact is, our economy is benefiting from people coming in here. And over the years, going back before we were members of the European Union, it was Enoch Powell, of all people, who encouraged people to come over from the Caribbean to work in our National Health Service and to work on the London Underground.
When he was Minister of Health in the 60s.
Yeah.
And my last question, do you think that David Cameron is right to flood the Lords with over 100 peers in order to reform the upper chamber?
Well, I think that's an absolute last resort. I think what this episode is going to do is, however, sharpens people's minds on whether we need to undertake some further reform. It was Mr. Asquith, a Liberal Prime Minister, who sought to flood the House of Lords with Liberal peers to defeat the recalcitrant Tories in 1910. And that threat was not in the end carried out. The threat was enough, as it were, to bring about a settlement. So we've now got over 800 people in the House of Lords. This isn't satisfactory, and most people recognise it's not satisfactory. It's the largest second chamber, I think, in the world.
After China.
After China, yeah, exactly. So I think it is going to put pressure on now for people to go for reform, but whether we can find the right formula for it is the real question we have to face up to. And we've had great difficulty because we've got all the power in the Commons. If you have, for example, an elected House of Lords, 400 people or something like that, no elected body is going to be content with no power. And that's why if we see the second chamber as being simply a reviewing chamber, then you want people in there who are capable of bringing skills, which we don't necessarily have in the Commons, because it's very difficult to pursue a career or come into this place with knowledge of having worked, whether it's in the arts, in sport, in medicine, in academia, in industry, in the law. So the skill pool in the House of Commons is not as extensive as it once was. That is partly because the role of a Member of Parliament has changed over the years, and also because it is now the role of Member of Parliament is open to so many more people, quite rightly, but it is jolly difficult to make your way. And I found when I left the House of Commons in 1974, I needed a job. And I went round, talked to one or two people. After all, I'd been Member of Parliament. Surely I was attractive, and I'd been in industry before. And people said, "Oh yeah, Alan, very, very interested to talk about this and maybe take you on. You will be giving up politics, won't you?" And I said, "Well, hang on. I thought I really just well, that would be very difficult." More and more organisations, partnerships, companies and so on, look for full-time commitment. They don't want to invest in somebody who's going to waltz off and become a Member of Parliament. And that has created, over the last 50, 60 years, a great divide, as it were, between the commerce and industry of our country and the actual knowledge that Members of Parliament collectively possess. Now, I don't want to exaggerate that too much, but it's certainly been that trend. And to some extent in 2015, it was repaired a little bit. I think there's some good talent on both sides of the House that came in 2015. But Parliament really must have some understanding of what makes the world tick around them, so that they do the right things to ensure that Britain is on top of its game.
We shall wait and see. Well, thank you very much.
Okay,
it was a great pleasure. Thank you.